an extra effort. I appreciate it. So my talk is entitled The Door of Everything, A Journey into the Unknown. Oh, and there's the door. That's in my backyard. Okay? So we're going to be going on a little adventure this morning. So are you questioning why you're here? Not just here, but here. Are you feeling more and more that every day is like Groundhog Day, like it's kind of a repeat over and over? Or does it kind of feel like the Truman story where slightly unreal, a little fabricated, just a little too plasticky? This is the one that comes up for me a lot. Peggy Lee's refrain, is that all there is? Is there a gnawing inside of you, something that you just can't quite explain, something nudging or maybe a little bit unsettling going on? Maybe answers and decisions that were once so quick and easy to make, now they take a little bit more time, a little second guessing. Maybe you're starting to notice coincidences and synchronicities. Well, if any of those are happening, these might be the signs that you're ready to experience walking through the door of everything. About a month ago, Reverend Kathy put me on the list to speak. And about the next day after I got assigned, Crystal called and she said, well, what are you going to talk about? And I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to talk about. And she said, well, I need the name to put in the e-blast. You know, you hear speakers saying this all the time. Well, now I understand why it's kind of tricky. So she was very gracious, but somewhat tenacious. And a couple of days later, she again, Connie, do you have the name of your talk? And I'm like, I still don't have it. Well, it was interesting because when I got off the phone with her, I was sitting at my computer and I was reading my emails, and there was one that was to read your tarot card. And so I clicked on it, and it said, if you have a question you want to know an answer to, you just take a moment and pause and ask the question and then pick a card. So, okay, what should I talk about on July 23rd? And then I pulled the Ace of Wands. So I'm going to read to you what the Ace of Wands is. The Ace of Wands is one of the most auspicious and exciting tarot cards to pull because it is connected to making your dreams a reality. This card is all about new beginnings and the excitement and trepidation that comes with taking the first step into the unknown. Now is the time for you to let go of any hesitation or fears of failure that you have around personal project or creative endeavors or even significant life changes. Trust in your own abilities and remember that setbacks and failures are just stepping stones on the way to success. Well, that was kind of interesting. But then, as soon as I finished reading it, there was a knock on my door. And it was my next door neighbor. And he came over and he said, hey, Connie, I think it's time to work on the door project. I think it's time. And so I went, well, isn't that interesting? The Ace of Wands is telling me to step into the unknown. And my neighbor Cassidy is saying it's time to put the door of everything into the yard. So this old door came from an old trailer. I think it was like 1964. And for those of you who live in Las Molinas, you know about cabanas. A cabana is where you put this old trailer, you have this old trailer, and then you build a house around it. So this was inside that house. Well, it was time for the old trailer to come out. And I really loved that old door, mostly because it looked very Star Trek-like. And so I got the door, and it's very heavy. It's metal, and it was sitting in the back of my property for at least 10 years. and it was covered with mud and leaves. You could barely see it. But about a month ago when I went walking by it, I knew immediately what I wanted to do. And so right at the same time, more coincidences, my neighbor was out there to help me pull it out because it was so heavy. And when I told him what I was going to do, he got so excited. He said, well, here's the deal. You clean it up, and then I'll come over and I will cement it into your yard. So it just got put up. So the door would be in the yard as a portal to a higher experience, a doorway of infinite possibilities. It's kind of like tuning your radio onto a different station. Suddenly you hear a different song. That old 60s song you've been carrying around, and you hear something brand new. So in that moment, you went through it. You would leave those old songs behind and begin anew. Well, this got me really excited, and I thought this was going to be really great until the door actually got put in the yard. And then one day, I was standing in front of it for real and really grasping the metaphor of what the door represented for me. And all of a sudden, questions started coming up, and I was kind of surprised, like, what if I don't like what's on the other side? What if I chicken out and I can't go through the door? What if I just completely freak out and I can't accept what's on the other side? And it became real clear to me that I needed to know the unknown. And I remember last Sunday, Rev. Kathy was talking to us about you don't know what you don't know. And I'm like, yeah, if you know it, then it's not the unknown. But it was a really big part of me to have to really know the unknown. So I was literally standing in front of the door and going, should I stay or should I go? And my heart wanted me to go, but my fear literally made me just stop to really think about this a little bit more. So thank goodness the community book we're reading this month is this book, coincidentally called Beyond the Known. Realization, and it is written by Paul Selig. It is a channeled book, and I'm going to be quoting some things from it, so bear with me, because this is channeled, and the languaging can be a little thick, but it is so profound, and I couldn't say it anywhere near as well as these the guides could say it. So just bear with me, and I'll try to do it slowly so you can understand what the guides are telling. On page 8, the guides say, yes, you may choose to stay here where you are. You are loved as you are. You cannot fail here. But if you give yourself permission to claim the truth of who you have always been, you will know that indeed this is not all there is, and that you can walk through the door. Unquote. So while it's perfectly okay for you to stay right where you are, today I'm mostly going to be talking to those of you who are ready to open the door and walk through it. And for those of you who already have done it, please, share your experiences with us, because we're all here together doing this. So I'm just going to provide some tips, and the tips are mostly from the guides in this book that we're reading. In the book, Paul Selig introduces us to the guides, and they are just these energies that are providing insight and knowledge to help us on the journey. And they talk a lot about the upper room. And the upper room is just that open spaciousness, that unbounded consciousness. When you walk through that door, you're in a whole different dimensional reality. And that's what they're telling us about, is the truth of what we are. And so their information is pretty amazing. In the prologue, this is something else the guides say. To bring you to the upper room simply requires you to consent. To have the simple experience of it is to align the self to the presence of what already is. You are not making anything happen. You are accepting what is, what exists at the top of the stairway in the upper room. This is the room of freedom where you are not bound by what you have thought or consented to as a small being in consent with others who are consenting to the same, adhering to what you've been taught to expect at the denial of what is. These are the things you no longer align to in the upper room. So tip number 1 is that you have to consent to go, and it's okay to stay. Tip number 2, you need to be open to something new. You need to not know. You need to let go of this in order to open to that. You're stating, I am that I am, not this one. If you decide to go, you can't get there from here. You can't use old patterns of thinking, old beliefs, and old desires to get there. You know, when you're playing in a field, you really, your viewpoint, you're locked into that moment of where you are on the field. But if you go way to the top of the stadium and you look from that top row, you can actually see the overall picture of what's really going on. And you can see what this human experience really is looking like. And again, to quote the guides, the human experience is an idea made into form that may have been taught by your parents, supported by your culture, agreed to by you. This realization is of great importance, but only if by seeing it, you're willing to let it go. To continue to hold on keeps you here. And this was my favorite line. What lies beyond the known is not your potential. It's your inheritance. So I've been a student of A Course in Miracles for over 7 years. And this is exactly what the course is about. It is truly a psychological mind training course to awaken you to the idea that everything in the world only has the value that you, your parents, your teachers, etc., have given to it. And those 365 daily lessons, the purpose is to move you from thinking that this worldly experience is all there is, and to open you to the existence and the experience of the upper room. So, number 3 tip, be patient. This is what Reverend Christine called in her lesson a couple of weeks ago, the not yet state. That really resonated with me because I'm not comfortable in not yet. I like to check it off my list, and to have to hang out in not yet is difficult. But it is important because some things require time. Some require, they have to set. They have to rise. They have to interweave with each other. Sometimes you just have to be patient and hang out and just have kind of like, beginner's mind. Don't judge the experience, just experience the experience. So we have consent, we have, consent, be open to something new, and then be patient. The 4th one is to start watching for unusual things to happen. When unusual things start happening that don't fit the old paradigm, you're getting to see a crack in the world as you've known it. Notice how life may be working in a different, more kind of a non-linear way. You may find that you stumble on a new, easier way to do something you've done the same way for 75 years. You run into someone right after you thought about them, and there they showed up. And sometimes it takes life-altering situations to open that window and let you see differently. And I have my best one to share with you. And I am so excited because I have a witness to this very cool thing that happened. And Jasper, where are you? There's Jasper. Jasper Lurch is in the room, and he is my witness because he was with me when this happened. That's right. So if I get it wrong, just be still. I'm going from memory here. So this is how I remember it. So my husband, Roger, died very unexpectedly. And after he died, very odd things started happening. The fabric in my life had definitely been torn. And so I was in a more open state for these kinds of unusual things to happen. Well, Roger had a 4,000 square foot shop, and it was packed. I tried to find one of the pictures I took because I thought if I ever do a lesson and I talk about this, I can show the picture to show you how packed this shop was. He had old tools, new tools, vintage, antiques. He had a whole lot of stuff from our center there. All of our Christmas decorations used to be in the shop. I mean, it was just loaded with furniture and building supplies. Anyway, you get the picture. So after he made his transition, I had to figure out what to do with all this stuff. So Jasper offered to buy Roger's, and I'm really making this up, I think, a nine-end Diamond Jubilee Ford tractor. Okay, so it's a collectible one, and Roger had just finished restoring it, and Jasper said that he would buy it. So the two of us went over to Dave's tractor shop in Derryville because he needed to buy a flail mower to attach to the back of it so he could mow his orchard. So we went over to Dave's tractor shop, and Dave and some of the buddies who were hanging around, they looked at the tractor, and Dave just shook his head, and he says, this is not going to work. The most important part is missing. And it was some kind of a universal part that lets you attach different implements to it. And without that part, tractor's basically useless. So I'm like, well, let's order a part. And he's like, well, this is an old vintage tractor, and you can't order that part. So I'm like, well, how about if we go to the junkyard of tractors and and apparently this is a pretty rare tractor, so that was not an option. So undauntedly, I look at Jasper and I say, well, let's go to the shop and find it. Now, Dave and his buddies, they had been to Roger's shop. And they all rolled their eyes and they were like, good luck. And we took off and we got there, and we spent quite a bit of time. We used our eyes well. We were looking in logical places, not so logical places, random places. We moved what we could out of the way, but really we had absolutely no idea. I mean, there were a couple spots where there was tractor paraphernalia, so that was our first shop, but we didn't find it. So after about an hour and getting a little weary, I literally stood in the middle of the shop and I said, angels, help me. We need to find the part. Now, at that time, that wasn't pretty common for me. Now, I do it all the time, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen me find things in this building, calling on the angels. But at that time, that was just kind of flew out of my mouth. And I stood there, and it was like suddenly very quiet. And I told Jasper to go to the back of the shop. And in the back against the wall was a whole set of lockers, gym lockers. Why not? So there were gym lockers, and Jasper went over and he opened one, and I'm like, no, not that one. I said, the next one. So he goes to the next one, and he's moving stuff down in the bottom of the locker, and I'm like, no, up on the top, that little shelf. And even though I couldn't see, and he couldn't see, I mean, he put his hand in and he goes, Connie, there's not anything there. And then I said, further back. And he reached his hand all the way back in there and he pulled out a cloth bag. And that, as I remember, that cloth bag had like a tie or something. And he opened it up. There was the part. So this is the kind of stuff that you start saying unusual things start happening. They don't really make a lot of sense for us in this experience, but in the upper room, this is kind of like normal. So watch for new unexpected things with perhaps new solutions. The fifth tip is to note synchronicities, which all of that basically was a synchronicity. But after I wrote that down, I remembered Celestine Prophecy. You remember that book? Yeah, well, James Redfield offered us 12 insights. And the very first insight, he says, synchronicity is the entry point, the measure of whether we're connected spiritually. These meaningful coincidences are tiny miracles steering us toward the good life. They're always seeking first to awaken us and then to allow us to be guided by a spiritual connection to the unfolding of our intended destiny. Staying in a state of alert expectation increases the frequency of synchronistic answers. So it's important to watch for them, and then when they happen, really give them some energy around them, because what he's saying here is that these are the miracles that are leading us forward. And in fact, he goes on to say, a new spiritual awakening is occurring in human culture, an awakening brought about by a critical mass of individuals, that's us, who experience their lives as a spiritual unfolding, a journey in which we are led forward by mysterious coincidences. In fact, it's the coincidences that lead us forward. So there's no accident that you're noticing them. There's no accident I drew the Ace of Wands and my neighbor showed up at my door. There is no accident I was drawn to put a door in the middle of my backyard. There is no accident that the missing tractor part was found. And there's no accident I'm here talking to you today and that you're listening. You know? And there's also no accident that my sixth tip is the sixth insight. And that one says, you are here because this is where you need to be. Your whole life has been a long road leading you directly to this moment. And in this moment, I need to clarify something. There really is no this world and that world. And there's no this human me and that spiritual me. Remember everything, everywhere, all at once? That really is what it is. And so all of it is right here. It's just that that's kind of hard for us to really conceptualize. So the contrast and the metaphors, they kind of help explain it better. But the truth is, it's all here. It's all here now. And we're just here sharing, unpeeling the layers together so we can get back to what we already were before we added them all. Other importance, when we walk through the door of everything, we don't build a house and stay there. It's where we go to learn the final 12th insight. And that one is, the the sensation of God's presence within us. We'll still have our personal identity, but this status becomes subservient to our divine nature. It's not the door to everything, because you don't go anywhere. It's the door of everything. We enter the upper room and bring the wisdom and the realization of our divine nature back to guide us through this human experience, to grow from it and to support and share it with each other. So, let's be brave. Seems like that's been the theme. Well, it is the theme. It is the 2023 theme for the Costa Rica Chicas. So we decided that our mantra for this year was going to be brave. So let's agree to go into the unknown together. And if you're willing to do it, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. The only thing that can be on the other side of that door. Does anybody have a guess? What'd you say? How about love? Love is the only thing that doesn't argue with anything. It doesn't compare or compete with anything. It's always in harmony and balance and expansion. And if it weren't that, if it were anything else, it would have destroyed itself by now. It could not have maintained that balance and that harmony. So on the other side, all there is love. And in fact, that's the glue that holds all of this together. We come here to this center to lift each other and to learn from each other. We come to be with our community. Because in truth, at the end of the day, we're all walking each other home. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you, all my